About 2.5 years ago, we decided to make a tree house, which we did successfully, despite the fact that there's not actually any trees involved. But we built the thing for my son, and he's been loving it. There's just one little part that we didn't complete. We didn't do a single thing to the inside. And then time got in the way, and projects got in the way, and life went on, and here we are 2.5 years later, and we still haven't completed the inside. But today is the day that that's all gonna change. Actually, it's raining today, so maybe tomorrow, but tomorrow we're gonna finish the inside. So follow along, enjoy the video, check out the video description for links to how not to be a terrible father like me, and let's get on with the video. Let's go back 2.5 years when we had the idea to build the treehouse in the first place. Now, it started with a drawing, and then we went outside and we marked out where we wanted all of our footers to go. I rented this spiral screw thing and dug some holes, had a cement truck come in, pour some concrete, and then once we had all our footers in place, we spread out a bunch of bark chips, you know, to make a nice little working area surrounded by railroad ties. Then we started putting up our posts for our treehouse, because if I didn't mention it before, we didn't actually have a tree, so we had to basically build stilted houses. I know you're probably like, well, there's a bunch of trees in the background. Well, those aren't technically my property. After we built our platforms, we built some stairs, the foreman helped, and, you know, it was starting to look good. Except we had 2 towers with no way to get in between them. So then we built a bridge that was suspended in between those 2 towers. That was a whole nother ordeal. You can go back and watch those videos to see how badly we failed the first time, but once we had the bridge up and working, we started building the actual house. First we did the walls. We did 4 of them because, well, that's pretty much how you build a house. Got those framed in, and then we started working on the roof. Once we had the roof all framed, it started raining, so we were like, we gotta get this thing covered up. We put a nice metal roof just in time for it to start snowing. And then the snow stopped. My friend Jared came over. We plopped in some windows. We put up some siding, and it was looking pretty darn good. But it wasn't too fun, so we wanted to add some fun things to it, so we added this whole back section which had swings, it had a tire swing, had regular swings. We even put up a flip and slide, and some other hanging, swinging apparatuses. And with that, the outside of the treehouse was pretty much complete, even with this nice little bucket to haul stuff up. I mean, the kids loved it. They were coming from all over the neighborhood. They were playing on that thing. And I thought, all right, just let me take a quick break and then I'll finish the inside. But a quick break can turn into a long break pretty fast. Let's go back 2.5 years and see what I had to say about the whole thing. I know, don't worry. Come here. Let me show you. It's completely, well, it's not finished at all, but that's because we're gonna do separate videos on the interior. So don't you worry, stay tuned, coming this fall or spring or whenever the heck we get around to it. Turns out whenever the heck we get around to it means 2.5 years later. This thing just sat. And I always had every intention to get back out here and finish it, but life, am I right? However, while I'm filming this video, it is exactly 2 weeks before summer break 2025, and I thought to myself, I have to get this thing done before summer break. The kids are getting older, and they're going to run out of time when they actually want to be out here using it, so now is the time. The first thing I wanted to do was add electrical to the treehouse. Now let me preface this by saying I'm not a flippin' electrician, so don't really watch too closely at what I'm doing here because I'm kind of making all this up as I go. I have a very minor understanding of electricity, just enough to get myself in trouble. First, I started out by putting all my boxes in place for my outlets, and then I grabbed this yellow cable? Is that what you call it? I don't even know what you call this stuff. I want to say Romex, but is that what you hook up to a TV? Or is that coax? I get them all confused. Anyways, I grabbed the yellow stringy wire stuff, ran it through the walls, and then just from being in the construction world, I've seen that they put these plates on the studs so you don't accidentally send a drill bit or a screw into your wires, so I went around and put a bunch of those up on the studs. Because, you know, If you're not a professional, you should pretend to be one and do as you see the professionals do. Now, in this video, you might say, well, there's a lot of places where there aren't plates up there. Well, rest assured, I just ran out. I went back and put them on before we covered them up. Anyways, after I got all my electrical roughly ran, it was time to insulate the inside of the treehouse. Again, don't know anything about insulation, just went to Home Depot, bought a bunch of it. While I was there, I also bought a bunch of shiplap because there was no way in heck I was going to try and drywall the inside of the treehouse. I mean, nobody wants to do drywall. So I figured shiplap would just look nicer, be easier, wouldn't have to mud and tape. Anywho, once we had all of our insulation up in the treehouse, we just started shoving it inside the walls, making sure to cut out around all of our electrical outlets, trying not to get too itchy from the fiberglass. Honestly, the insulation part was kind of fun because you take those little paper flaps and you fold them over the studs and you staple them in place. We almost had enough to insulate all the walls. We just ran out at the very end. We were just like this much short. But I bought thicker insulation for the roof, and so I figure if I have some left over of that, I'll just shove it in the walls. Anyways, pretty soon the walls were completely insulated. And next, I wanted to add a loft space above the front door. Kind of like right up here to make the inside of the treehouse just a little bit more fun and interesting. And I figured we might as well build the loft before we insulate the ceiling, because then we can stand on it and it'll just make life easier. So Craig helped me take some measurements of the inside of the treehouse to kind of see what we were working with. And then we grabbed some 2x6s. Are these 2x6s or 2x8s? I don't remember what I grabbed. I want to say they were 2x6s. I think that's what they were. Anyways, I went back into the shop to make all my cuts because I had the miter saw set up in there. Took my cut pieces up into the treehouse and I started tacking them together with the nail gun. I actually kind of failed here because the nails I had for the nail gun weren't long enough, so I tacked the whole thing together and then it fell apart. I don't remember if I show that on camera, but I actually went back and added screws because I didn't want to run to the store to get longer nails. So all this work that you're seeing now was for nothing. The important part is we got one side of it hooked together, and once it was hooked together, we had the wonderfully fun task of trying to wrestle the entire thing into place above the door, which I thought was going to be pretty difficult, and well, actually it was pretty difficult because anytime you got to lift stuff over your head, it's just not too fun. But we managed to get it up there. I anchored a few screws on the left side to hold it into place. We stuck a level up there to make sure it was perfect, and we added some more screws. At this point, it's flimsy as all get out, but don't worry, we're about to make it really nice and sturdy. You see, we took this other 2x6. We're going to slap that on the front. That's actually going to extend into the walls and attach to two studs, one above the window on the right and one right next to the window on the left. Those will get screwed on with structural screws that are rated for shear strength, which means, they're not going to snap off. And then, yeah, we just kind of screwed everything together. Now, we could have built this after we shiplapped the inside. It would have been a little easier to do our shiplapping, but again, I just thought we might as well get it out of the way now, and then we have a surface to stand on. So pretty soon, we had the whole loft framed out. And I'm not going to finish the bottom of this. I'm just going to leave it exposed and we'll paint it. And for the top, I think I'm just going to slap some pieces of plywood up there. I mean, it is a tree house after all. So when it comes to the finishing work, I think it's okay to be a little loosey-goosey. My whole design inspiration for the inside of this treehouse is to make it kind of look like an old farmhouse. My thought process was that the kids are going to come in here and beat the crap out of it. So if it looks a little rustic to begin with, well, they'll just make it look more rustic as time goes on. Anyways, after we had the loft good and framed out, it was time to slap that plywood up there. This is when I learned that bark chips make the perfect cutting surface for the track saw, because you can just cut right into them and you don't have to worry about anything. So a little zip zap zoop with the track saw, cutting those pieces of plywood down to the right size. And then I remembered the unfortunate part about a treehouse is that you have to haul everything up and down the stairs over and over again. If you look in the background there, you can see that our backyard pond project is coming along nicely. You'll have to stay tuned for videos on that whole situation. Anyways, eventually I got the plywood up into the treehouse and very carefully slid it up onto that loft. And then all I really had to do was screw it in place. And voila, the loft was complete. I think it's going to be strong enough. I mean, I don't weigh a little amount, and it supported me just fine. And at one point, me and Craig were both up there, and it wasn't budging, so I think 3 or 4 kids are going to be just fine. With the loft completely built, it was time to insulate the ceiling. Now you'll also see in this shot that I had ran electrical in the ceiling for can lighting. So that's up there. In case later you're like, where the heck do those can lights come from? Well, I did that earlier. I just didn't show it because, again, I'm not an electrician, so I'm not going to do a how-to video on how to wire a treehouse. I could probably get in a lot of trouble for that. Now the walls were insulated with R59, and the ceiling was insulated with R453. Those numbers are not right, but I don't remember what we used. Anyways, pretty soon we had the entire inside of the treehouse completely insulated. It was a lot more warm and cozy now, and we got it done just in time for the foreman to stop by and check out our work. Bum-ba-da-bum. He was pretty stoked on the addition of a loft, because now he could get up high and look out that upper window, and maybe finally take off those stickers that we never took off when we first built it.
So I ran all the electrical in the treehouse. Now, 2-3 years ago when we built the treehouse, we thought ahead that we'd want to add electrical to this. So we actually buried a conduit that goes underneath the whole play structure. So what we have to do now is we have to run the wire that is powered through the conduit. We're going to add conduit onto this, and we'll run it up the side and tie into the treehouse. Now this is buried. It goes underground all the way over here, and it pops up right here. Now we had the electricians come in because we wanted everything done right, and they ran electrical from a sub panel over on the house. They trenched a line over to here. So we're gonna have to dig out here and then take the power from this. We're gonna get rid of this outlet, and we're just gonna tie it all into a junction box that's buried underground because I don't want the kids to run into that. I don't know if you can bury a junction box underground, but we already passed inspection, so that doesn't really matter. We'll make sure it's all watertight and sealed up. Anyways, that way the treehouse is all hooked into the sub panel on the outside of the house. It's on its own breaker. Everything, you can switch it on and off from the breaker if you ever wanted to kill the power to the treehouse. We're gonna do that now so that while we're working up there, putting up all the shiplap that's going on all the walls, we'll have power and potentially lights. So let's get to work.
Now we were super smart to already run this conduit when we built the treehouse, but this conduit has now sat in the ground for almost 3 years, uncovered on both ends, which means that I'm sure it's got all manner of bugs and water and snakes and who knows what inside of it. So the first thing we had to do was try and clear out that conduit and make sure it was nice and clean and, more importantly, dry. So we brought out the air compressor. I wrapped some duct tape around the end of my little blower gun so that it would be a nice tight fit. I shoved it in one end and we cranked up that air compressor to 11. And sure enough, just as I suspected, the years of Oregon rain had filled the inside of the conduit up with liquid, and I'm really glad we cleaned that out before we started running wire through there. We also had run a string through that conduit when we originally buried it, but I'm sure some curious kid at some point had pulled it out. So now we had to figure out a way to rerun a string through there so that we could pull wire through. Now I had heard of electricians just blowing a string through with an air compressor, so I shoved a wad of string in there and I tried to blow it from one end to the other. That didn't really work. So I thought, well, if blowing doesn't work, then sucking has to work, right? As a wise man once said, if you can't blow, you should suck. I don't know how I feel about those wise words, but I will tell you that sucking actually worked perfect. It sucked that string right up from the other side. Now that we have a string passing all the way through the conduit, we can do all sorts of things, like run our wire through. Now, at this point, I wasn't convinced that the conduit was completely cleaned out. So we ran the wire all the way through, but when it came out the other side, it was still pretty darn wet. So then we pulled the wire back through. I tied a bunch of wads of paper towels onto that string, and we cleaned the pipe out. We actually kept doing this over and over again until I was sure the conduit was completely clean and dry. Once that was done, we ran our wires through the conduit, and we kind of added to it to build up and run along the side of the treehouse, making sure everything was glued together and very watertight as we went. Eventually, we got the conduit run all the way up the side of the treehouse, where it's going to tie into an exterior waterproof junction box right here. So all those wires I ran on the inside of the treehouse get fed into that junction box, and then everything gets spliced together. Is that up to code? I don't know, but as long as the treehouse doesn't burn down, I think we'll be okay. Just kidding. Don't tell anybody. So here's the moment of truth. Look at that. Electricity to the treehouse. Everything seemed to work just fine. So with our electrical run and hooked up to our main sub panel on the house, it was time to close in our walls and make everything look nice and pretty. So we set up the miter saw down below because there wasn't a ton of room in the treehouse. Craig would cut pieces of shiplap to the right length, pass them up to me, and I would tack them onto the wall, cutting around the outlets where I needed to. It was like I was back at the cabin doing trim work again. I had horrible flashbacks. The good news is this is one 12 by 12 treehouse versus an entire flippin' home. So all in all, the shiplap went up pretty quick. Pretty soon we had an entire wall covered, and then, oh boy, probably shouldn't shoot nails at the camera. And then we started working on the next wall. I'm going to kind of breeze through this because there's nothing more boring than watching somebody hang shiplap for an hour and a half. So yeah, I got that part done, and then I put some more pieces up, a little bing bang boom, a little zip zap zoop, a little easy squeezy lemon peasy, all that junk. And as you can see, every board of shiplap made it look a little more cozy in there, just like the treehouse of every little boy's dreams. Designed by Joanna Gaines from the Magnolia Network. Pretty soon we had all the walls shiplapped, so it was time to start working on the ceiling, which I thought was going to be a way bigger pain than it actually was. It really wasn't too bad. The trick is that you orient the shiplap with the lip on the top so that you can kind of catch your piece on there as you're going, because that way you don't have to hold the thing above your head. It kind of stays put once you get it slid in there. And then you just nail it to the studs. Now I had already marked and measured where all my can lights were going to go, so we just covered up all those cords, and then I'll cut in holes for the lights later. After we got all the walls and the ceiling shiplapped, I needed to trim out all the windows, so I just added some nice interior trim pieces on all four sides like this, and then once I had those in place, I added some exterior trim pieces, kind of like this, and pretty soon those windows look like they could just be in an 1890s farmhouse somewhere, overlooking a little creek in the woods. I don't know. I doubt my son's going to think that. He's probably going to be like, where do we store the Pokemon cards? Kids these days, they have no respect for history. Anyways, let's try and speed this thing up so you don't have to watch me trim out an entire treehouse. After I got the windows done, then I trimmed out the doors, blah-de-blah. As you can see, I cut that top piece a little bit, wonky, but you can't tell because, well, it's a treehouse. And then I had a thought about redoing the entire floor, maybe putting a floating floor in here, but we had done tongue and groove pine for our subfloor, and the kids are going to be in here with muddy shoes and getting all dirty, so I just decided to leave the tongue and groove pine. And I guess when I said we were done with the shiplap earlier, I misspoke. We were almost done with it. So I finished the ceiling, and then we obviously had those triangles on either side that we had to fill in. But before we get to that, I wanted to cut in for my can lighting, because I had marked and measured where those were going to go, but I just had the measurements in my head, and I was afraid if I waited too long, I'd forget what the measurements were, and then I wouldn't remember where to drill holes. I went to the store and I bought this gigantic hole saw, which kind of scared me a little bit, but it was just the right size for a can light. And then very carefully, I marked out where those lights should go. And the cool thing about can lights these days is you just wire in this little box, and then all you have to do is plug in your can light and shove it in the hole. I mean, they make installing electrical stuff so flippin' easy nowadays. I ended up doing 4 of these LED can lights because it's a small space and I figured that would be plenty bright. So once I got one installed, I did the next one, and then once I got that one installed, you're never going to guess, but, well, I did the next one, and then eventually all 4 were installed, and it was nice and bright. I did have to put safety glasses on because drilling above your head, well, it's just a recipe for disaster with getting sawdust in your eyes. After the lights were installed, we filled in our little triangle pieces at the peak. Now, if this was going to be my house, I would have taken the time to really be precise and get all those angles absolutely perfect. But it's a tree house, so I figured let's just make our cuts whatever, and then we'll trim out all the seams to make it look nice when we're done. So we got our triangles done, and then we added a bunch of trim pieces to kind of cover up all of our sloppy work. And then I hired the foreman to come in and fill all the nail holes, which is a job that his tiny little fingers are perfect for. So, with all the nail holes filled, the only thing left to do was to paint the entire interior. So I called my friend Peter. No, I'm just joking. I'm gonna paint the flippin' thing myself because it's not that big, and, well, here we go. Let's get painting. So I went to the store, I bought a hazmat suit that is rated for hazardous waste, and I got suited up for a day of painting. Gotta say, this design is not the best because once you get the suit on, you can't even see what you're doing. On the upside, you won't get any paint on your body, which is pretty good. To paint the interior, we're going to be using this Greco Sure Shot, which it doesn't hold a ton of paint, but it sprays really well. And you don't have to thin down the paint at all, which is super nice. Started out by loading it up with some wall and wood primer from Sherwin-Williams, and I primed the entire loft because, well, it was just raw wood. And as much as I complain about painting and say that I hate painting and that I never want to paint anything, you know, once I got started, it was actually pretty terrible. I hate painting and I never want to do it again. But, you know, that's not the important part. The important part is I did it. And by the next day, I had everything primed, everything painted, and it was time to remove all of our tape and paper. And I gotta say, it was looking pretty darn good in here. Huh? It's like a little miniature house. Yeah, I'm like a painting fiend. I love painting. Just kidding. I never said that. I mean, I guess the kind of fun thing is taking all the tape off. It's like unwrapping a giant Christmas present. And while I was removing things, I decided to finally remove these stickers that had been stuck to this window for 2.5 years. Yay, progress. After I did that, we took all this paper up off the floor and exposed the beautiful tongue and groove pine that was coated in a layer of mud and dirt. But you know what? It's a treehouse. It's outside. And if we put some nice floor in here, the kids are going to destroy it anyways. Now, you might recognize this ladder from long ago. I actually did a video building this ladder for my wife's printing studio. But you might also remember that we got rid of the printing studio, so I decided to repurpose the ladder in here. We'll come back to that in a second. For now, I decided to hang up a nice little basketball hoop so, you know, the kids could have fun playing. did a little practicing. I'm pretty much a professional basketballer at this point. I was so good shooting it forward that I decided maybe I'll try my hand at a little trick shot. So did a few little finger twirls, Harlem Globetrotter style, and then voila! Wait, let me try again. Cha-cha! Nope. Okay, wait, hold on. Whoop-de-doo-doop-dee. Nope. Okay, here we go. Choo! Nope. All right. Hold on just a second. I promise. This is going to be worth it in the end. Da-da-da-da. Okay. Doo! Boop-ba-da-boop. Nope. Okay. Wait for it. And he misses it. Oh, right. This is getting ridiculous. Maybe basketball is just not my sport. After hanging up the basketball hoop, I was trying to think like what else could be fun up here and not super dangerous. How about a dartboard? Don't worry, it's one of those electronic ones and they have plastic tips. My wife had this old antique table laying around, so I stuck that up there with a few chairs. Don't worry, we did put a plate cover on that outlet under the table. I know that's probably driving some of you guys crazy. And then once I got all that installed, I wanted to figure out a way that I could make that ladder slide back and forth on the loft. So I went to a local farm store and I just bought an exterior barn door track because they're super beefy and industrial. And then we mounted it sideways on the front of the loft like this. And then we just took the brackets that are meant to hook onto the top of a barn door. We stuck them straight out off the front of the track, kind of like this. And then all we had to do was bolt them to the side of the ladder. Now the ladder's already got wheels on the base because it used to slide back and forth in the studio. So in theory, this should work pretty good. So I just held the brackets on either side, drilled some holes in there, put some bolts through there, added some nuts, and realized that I'm much better at building things than basketball. But that's okay. Now you can see the ladder's just a little bit too tall and it was going to run into the ceiling, so I just grabbed a circular saw and did something really stupid. Shving! Oops. But that's alright. Freehand for the win. Now it should be short enough that you can slide the ladder all the way to the end on either side, and it should stop just short of the pitch of the roof. There you go. I'm sure some kid's gonna fall off that and break their arm, but that's childhood for you. And I added this nice friendly sign to the outside of the treehouse. That was my son's idea. And just like that, the interior was complete. Now it might still look a little bit plain, but I did that by design. I didn't want to have all the fun decking this place out. I want my son to be able to come in and hang art on the wall and decide what he wants in there. The important part is they have lights, it's insulated so it'll stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter. They can plug a heater in there or put an air conditioner in there. Was super stoked to bring the foreman out and he was pretty happy with how it looked. I mean, sure, it only took 2.5 years to finish, but the important part is it is done in time for summer and now the kids can have sleepovers out here. Pretty soon they were playing darts, playing basketball, and then I had to just jump in there and show them my skills. So I sank a few baskets, and then it was time for the trick shot. I had been practicing. This was my moment. Here we go. Oh yeah! I nailed it. Never doubted it for a minute.
You know, in finishing this treehouse, which is a very square space, it got me thinking about the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace, which is kind of cool. If you don't know who Squarespace is, then where have you been, living under a rock? Squarespace is a company that allows you, somebody who probably doesn't know how to make professional looking websites, make professional looking websites without being a web designer. Basically, you get on their website, you pick out a template, you customize it to make it exactly what you need, and you just plug in all your information. It could not be easier. If you need a domain name, you can buy one at Squarespace. If you want to sell products, well, you can add unlimited products to your Squarespace website, so you can sell as many as you want. And the really cool thing is that if you take credit cards through the Squarespace app, it automatically updates your quantity online, even if you're selling in person. So you don't have to keep track of quantities in two places. Now, in today's age, Squarespace is doing a lot of really cool things with AI, which is pretty sweet. Check this out. AI is crazy. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but Squarespace's Blueprint AI, it's basically this website builder. You get a fully custom website in just a few steps. They use basic information about your industry, goals, and personality to generate premium quality content and personalized design recommendations. I know, crazy. So if you want to check out Squarespace, go to squarespace.com/bourbonmothwoodworking and you're going to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Or you can just use the coupon code BOURBONMOTHWOODWORKIng at checkout. I'll put a link on the screen, I'll put a link in the video description, or just go to squarespace.com/bourbonmothwoodworking. Seriously, you need a website, check out Squarespace.